Uncle Ron and stuff. Radio stuff. Radio. I doubt most people even have a radio in their home anymore, and maybe teenagers have never even uh, listened to a radio. Usually, radios are only in cars anymore, and people listen to them for traffic and weather and stuff like that. But once upon a time, when there wasn't any internet, and actually television didn't come along till late 40s, early 1950s, and television really wasn't even common until the 60s and 70s. So anyway, before internet, there was radio. Radio came around in the 1900s. Okay, well, this is a video to encourage you to maybe explore radio. Now, what you're familiar with in the car is AM and FM. And AM is pretty bad and local, and FM sounds better, and most people just use FM. But AM is interesting because at night now, the signals from stations bounce off what's called the ionosphere up above the earth. I forget how many miles, but it bounces and it will come back down as opposed to FM, which is more like a line of sight. You got to be fairly close to an FM station to get it. But AM at night, if you tune around, you can pick up weak signals from all over the United States. When I was a kid, I used to listen to Del Rio, Texas, or the station out of Cincinnati, or about WBZ, whatever it was called in Boston, on an AM radio at night. Now it's got to be at night. The ionization layer goes up at night because the sun's not ionizing it or whatever, and so you get a longer path up and back down again. But besides FM AM, which I doubt even children know about it anymore, and people don't have radios in their houses, there's all kinds of other stuff. I call it shortwave, and that's where I got started with shortwave stuff because most countries of the world have one or more shortwave broadcast stations. In World War II, they were used a lot to keep their people informed about the status of the war and so on. So if you have what's called a shortwave receiver, you can hear broadcasts in English from all over the world, different countries, stations. Radio Moscow is, huge. You could almost pick that up on your ear if you listened well. But there's lots of others, all kind of strange stuff. But that's a shortwave band. Right behind me is the Federal Communication Commission regulated radio or spectrum space. And the radio spectrum, as it's known, is like a small plot of land. There's only so much of it. So they have to decide, okay, over here we're going to let just marine radios, people talking back and forth on the ocean or between boats, okay? And over there, we're going to let amateur radio operators talk. And over here, we're going to have those people that have big transmitters like Radio Moscow. And over here, we're going to have military. And over here, we're going to have aircraft, like aircraft communicating to ground controllers and between air traffic control centers and so on. Well, this thing, I won't look at it in detail, but you can see there's lots and lots of different segments, they're in different colors, and it goes all the way down frequencies. Like AM is like 1500 kilohertz. Yeah, kilohertz. Real not much oscillation or cycles, okay? But then that goes way up into megahertz, which is much faster cycling, and even into what's called gigahertz, which is like microwaves. A microwave is actually a radio transmitter that will heat up food. This was discovered. We used to have radar stations, I guess we still do, up in Alaska and up in there looking for Soviet missiles coming over from Soviet, because that's the path they would take over the poles. Anyway, some guy was out working on them one day. He had a candy bar in his pocket, and he found that it had melted because the radar was heating him up. So that's how microwave ovens came about, because they are radio waves, and very high frequency radio waves, and then they will penetrate the food and wiggle the molecules and make them warm. Anyway, radios. You have to, AM FMs are a dime a dozen. You can get them anywhere, all over the place. They make them in portables, blah, blah, blah. And they're good for FM. And at night, even, you could get some AM on it. Now, if you want to explore shortwave, they also make little boxes, little handheld, portable AM, FM, and multi-band radios. And new multi-band being they can look at shortwave and what's called medium wave and long wave, and they can. Uh, there's a whole world out there. That's what I'm trying to say. I know people sit on YouTube and explore it all the time. They just hippy hoppy skippy around and see who's doing what where. And I understand the attraction to visual. I do. Visual's better than just audio stuff. But there, for somebody who wants to open up a whole new world, radio is one way to do that. A cheap shortwave or multiband radio will let you. When I was a kid, I built a little radio, and one night, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm listening, and out of the static that I'm hearing, I hear a radio station in what was known as Brazzaville at the time in Africa being taken over by, they were always overthrowing governments there, and this was being taken over by the current revolution. Anyway, there was this signal fading in and out coming from Radio Brazzaville in Africa at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm hearing it live. It's 3 o'clock in the morning my time. I don't know what it was there, probably early morning their time. And I'm hearing it live. That's magic. That's magic. Or listening to army troops move around in Europe, or I don't know, anything and everything. There's time beacons that broadcast the time every so often. There are, like I said, air traffic controllers and airplane conversations. There's CB radio, of course. People were familiar with that. I don't know how common that is anymore, but that was walkie-talkies or radios. You could hear all that stuff if you had a multi-band radio. They don't cost a whole lot, and it would let you explore all kinds of stuff. Now, with most radios, the bigger the antenna, the better it is. An antenna is just, in this crudest form, just a big long hunk of wire, you know. There are fancy ones, blah, 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 beams like television antennas. I don't know how many people have television antennas anymore because everybody's on cable, but you used to get television over the air, OTA. And that was broadcast, and up here on this, it shows the frequencies which television, over the air television, used, which is not that far away from where FM is used. Anyway, there used to be television antennas for over-the-air television, which was real common, until the FCC decided that we were going to go to high-definition televisions, and they were going to, that took years. But then they were going to only start broadcasting digital television signals. Well, digital just didn't have the same range as the old, whatever it was, modulated signals. So they had to come out with bigger antennas, and then half the time that didn't work. So it, in the end, forced people over on a cable. I'm sure there's still some television antennas around, But nonetheless, I'm talking about radios and antennas and a whole nother world you can explore with your ears. And there's all kind of stuff out there. You can hear ham radio conversations from people in Europe to people in South Africa. You can hear, like I said, broadcast stations if you want to know the news out of Finland, if you want to know what Saudi Arabia is talking about. They usually have an English language broadcast period every day. Okay, enough on radios. Again, I had to print this out because there's so many segments. You can't see them all down here. All kinds of radios, segments. Uh, I think they even have laser up here now because we're using laser communication more and more. And anyway, that's enough for today. And I'm only on here because everything is broken. I tried to order on Amazon today. They're overloaded. They can't do it. I finally got through like on my 15th attempt. I'm trying to upgrade a phone, and that's not working either. Everything is broken. I don't care what it is. It's a sign of our times. I don't know what that's all about. There's been a degradation of people caring about what they do for a long time. They take no pride in their work. That's one way to put about it. It's like, yeah, I don't get paid enough to think. I don't get paid enough to do it right. What does it matter anyway? Anyway, enough. Ron and radio, Ron and stuff. It's Uncle Ron, Uncle Ron and stuff. Episode 7, and it's the 7th of December already, 2022.